I'd like to welcome everybody to a regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District. And we're going to start out with the roll call.
Okay, Epstein,
Present.
Schroeder, here, Rhonda, here, Schuker, here, and Dobrik here.
Okay, thank you.
Present and accounted for.
All right, and announcements.
I'd just like to welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled board meeting. If you'd like to speak and you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand function.
Okay, so first item is, are there any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar?
Nope.
No? Okay.
How many attendees are on Zoom?
There are 3 attendees and our auditors are panelists, so that makes 5.
Thank you.
Okay. So next is comments from the audience, an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items, non-agenda items. Jeff.
Supervisor Brown here. In Pioneer, the Dollar General is going to be rebuilt as this spring. They put in plans, and so that's going through the system right now to get rebuilt. The building will have a slight tilt, not a flat roof, but a slight tilt, with a 4 foot to 5 foot slope from front to back. But that'll be a good thing. And we also got anybody's on the way up to the hill. Martello's going to get in Chipotle. That's just started into the process. It's going to be near where the Carl's Jr. is.
What?
That big land.
You can tell who lives in Avatar County.
Cuisine.
And then last but not least is the Pine Grove project of the widening. That whole project is on hold. The bids that came in were way overbid, about $2.5 million. And we don't have any more money to do that. We've thrown it kind of back at Caltrans, say, can you help us? And hopefully March we'll have some more answers.
Just for context, I was working on that project 15 years ago for Amador Water. So
Yeah.
it's been going on a while.
Okay, good. And thank you very much for the update. Is there anyone else? Okay. I did not notice any written comments in the board package.
There were none.
There were none. So next is adoption of the consent calendar, which consists of 5 items. The regular minutes from last meeting, the current consent for claims, the shutoffs report, and then also a resolution for Russ to authorize additional signature for Russ filings, and then reauthorizing AB 316 so we continue to do hybrid meetings. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Motion to adopt.
Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, done. Then we are ready for our first item, 9A, our fiscal year 2022-23 audit. And I believe Olga will be leading that. And you'll
Yes.
find it on page somewhere down there.
One more to go.
There
And
we go.
if you want to drive the presentation, Olga, I can give you control, or I can just scroll through as you like.
No, I think let's just keep the control with you. It'll make it easier for me as well. So thank you and good afternoon, everyone. We have completed our audit. We do have a draft financial statements ready to go that will be finalized and issued upon your approval today. On the next slide is the highlight, and the result of our audit is the reports that will be included was the financial statements. The first report, of course, is the report on the financial statements themselves, which will be the unmodified opinion. That's the clean opinion. That states that the financial statements are materially correct in accordance with the U.S. generally accepted accounting principles. There is an additional letter that we issue that goes along with the audit report, specifically as required by Rural Utilities Services, and that's a requirement of the debt agreement with the RUS. So there is a specific compliance requirements that they request that we include in that management letter that goes to them. Another audit report is a report on internal controls and compliance over financial reporting. That report is issued as a result of the government auditing standards that we follow in performing the audit. Those standards require that we look into the internal controls of the organization and issue a report that includes any findings on over financial reporting controls. And those could be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses that would be described in the report. So this year, for the first time in a number of years, I think it was a few years back that we had maybe findings in that report. This year, we do have a material weakness that was identified and included in that report that was specific to just the financial reporting controls. And it was a result of the number of audit adjustments that were identified as a result of the audit that required adjustments to the numbers in the financial statements. So, and I can cover those in the upcoming slides. So, just a reminder, our responsibility as an independent auditor is to really provide an opinion on the financial statements. Financial statements themselves are responsibility of management, as well as all underlying information and data that's contained and compiled in preparation of those financial statements. We do and are happy to assist with implementation of new accounting standards. And there's always new GASB state standards that come out. So we're happy to assist with those, assist with policies, accounting policies and things like that. But at the end of the day, management has the responsibility with your oversight over the financial records of the district. As I mentioned, we perform, if we can hold there for just a second. Yep. As I mentioned, that we perform our audit in accordance with government auditing standard that does hold us to a little bit of a higher level of standard, particularly when it comes to independence, education, and just understanding and knowledge of the industry for the clients that we're working with. So, and we're also required to communicate any findings to you at the end of our audit. And as I mentioned, management, of course, also has responsibility during the audit or in the audit. And that's maintaining the accurate records, maintaining this system of internal controls to ensure the records are accurate, assisting us and responding to our questions during the audit and things of that nature. So on the next slide now, we'll move on. So we have the following slides are all required communications that we are required to communicate to you by the auditing standards that we follow, because we do think that they're important for your understanding of the independent audit process. So the first one is significant accounting policies. These are all included in the footnotes to the financial statements. Those are lengthy notes in the back of the financial statements themselves that provide a framework for reporting things such as accounting policies that the district follows, management estimate descriptions and things of that nature. The management estimates is one area where we as auditors do pay particularly strong attention during the performance of the audit, because those estimates are based on management's knowledge of operations and management's assumptions about various transactions and activities of the entity. So there's a lot more room for error potentially. That's why we usually spend quite a bit of time just evaluating those management's estimates. Now, I have to say that for the district, most of the estimates are very common for any utilities, such as allowance for doubtful accounts on accounts receivables, for example, depreciable lives on capital assets. Those types of things are very common, and there's no unusual things there. The one estimate that's really some of you are familiar with based on our recent reporting is that actuarial valuations for pension liability and the OPEB liability. So those, we rely actually on information provided by the actuaries and the actuarial reports, because there's a lot of assumptions that really require a very specific knowledge and education to be able to put those together. So we rely on the third-party reports that are provided for recording those liabilities, and management relies on that as information as well. So, but we do evaluate those estimates, and we did find them during the audit to be reasonable and accurate. Significant difficulties encountered during the audit, we're required to report to you if we encounter any significant difficulties or if we have any disagreements with management during the audit in the application of accounting standards in particular. And I have to say that we didn't really have any disagreements and didn't really have any difficulties. The one thing we do have here on the slide is delayed timing of report issuance. As you know, generally we complete our audit much earlier and report to you in October, November timeframe. There was a little bit of extra time required to complete the audit that year or this year. So I just wanted to put it on to your attention. But once again, it's not necessarily a difficulty in performing the audit. Was more just kind of due to the change in personnel at the district. It just took a little bit longer to get information that we needed to complete the audit. So on the next slide, we are required to communicate to you if there is any audit adjustments that we identify that were recorded by management to correct the financial statements, or audit adjustments that we identified that management decided not to record because of their immaterial nature or disagreement or something like that. So the first slide here is the uncorrected, we call them uncorrected misstatements, but these were identified but did not get reflected in the financial statements presented to you. And the reason they didn't get reflected is because they weren't really considered to be significant or material. And we agree with management, there is no modification to the report because of these entries not being posted. So but we still have to report them to you. As you can see, some of these are reclassification entries. The one probably of the more significant proposed entry is two parts. It's a journal entry number 4 and number 5 at the bottom of the screen. This one relates to a new GASB that was effective in the current year and was required to be implemented with a restatement for comparison to prior year financial statements. This one it relates to subscription-based information technology arrangements. So in the past, any kind of software that's provided to the district as software as a service, or any IT agreement that is a multi-year and multi-service potentially, was recognized based on as invoices were paid for services by the vendor. What the new standard is required to look at the entire agreement and all of the different services provided as part of the agreement and record it as a right to use asset or subscription-based information technology asset and a related liability over the term of the agreement. The total, I do believe there were 2 contracts that met the qualification for being recorded in that way that the district has. The total asset and liability were just over $270,000. The first entry, or I should say entry number 4 here, shows the amount that should have been recorded in the first year of implementation of the standard, which is for 22 financial statements. And then the amortization effect of that contract would have affected 22 and 23. So the entry number 5 is just the amortization piece for 2023. Like I said, although it's a new standard and it's required to be implemented, at the end of the day, the total asset and liability were considered to be immaterial. And when I talk about materiality, really talk about the audit materiality that we establish for the audit based on just the various criteria, quantitative and qualitative. So this total amount really came under that materiality. So we agreed with management that it could be passed. And if the district doesn't have any additional agreements that it enters into the future, this particular asset and liability will just continue to decrease. I do believe there's 3 or 4 years left on these agreements, and it will be fully amortized. So currently this is not recorded in the financial statements. Questions on this particular slide before I move to the next one?
And I think that the two, just for clarification for the board, the two Sabitas would have been census, our meters, census, and PCS, I believe, was the other one, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
All right. So on the next slide then. So as I mentioned earlier, we did have several journal entries that were recorded as a result of the audit, and the total number is around 25 journal entries. The first information that we received before we started the audit is in August timeframe, and then we start our procedures shortly thereafter for June 30 year end. So we started our audit with that initial information received, and then there were several adjustments posted by the district and additional entries that we identified as a result of our audit work. So those were being made up until November when we received the updated trial balance. Was all of those entries recorded, and we didn't include all the detail of all the entries here, but they related to just some allocations between the different funds within the district, some accruals, some recognition in a correct period of transactions, some true-up entries. The biggest ones, I believe, were related to the pension and OPEB liabilities, but there was just the number of those adjustments resulted in the material weakness that I mentioned earlier. There was only one new accounting standard applicable for implementation in the current year, and as I mentioned earlier, that's GASB 96. Once again, the impact of that implementation is on the screen, and as I mentioned, this is one of those GASBs that as the district enters into new contracts for software as a service type agreements or cloud-based arrangements and things of that nature, that will be impacting in the future. But this year there was no impact to the financial statements that was reflected as a result of implementation. We always mentioned that the district is subject to legal proceedings, claims, and other things that come up as a result of just doing business as a district. So some of those potential risk and exposures should be disclosed in the notes to the financial statements, and they are the ones that are known in note 10, commitments and contingencies. We do look at those. We do evaluate them based on just discussion with district management as well as the outside parties to make sure that list is accurate. But that's one of the area that once again we consider important for your knowledge in the footnotes. All right. Some new pronouncements that are coming up in the next couple of years. I have to say that these three standards, GASB issued another standard 102 actually just very recently that's related to disclosures of risk. I have to say that these GASB 100 and GASB 101 are not as big of a implementation effort as the past GASBs have been, such as the pension one, the leasing agreement, and even the SPIDA. So I think this should not be super complicated going forward, and more importantly, shouldn't distort the financial statements internally prepared versus externally prepared to the extent that the past GASBs have. So this should be a much easier implementation in the next couple of years. This is the detail of the internal control comments. just the one that I mentioned, a material weakness over controls over internal of the financial reporting. The key component there is really, and I mentioned that in the past, is just the limited number of people at the district that have ability to prepare, review, and analyze information. Just the segregation of duties is limited, and because of that, it makes it challenging, especially during the turnover periods of when people change personnel changes at the district. So I think the core kind of cause of this is historically some of the processes haven't been documented well within the district. So when someone leaves and a new person comes in, there's not as much of a manual, if you will, to follow for some of the things that have to be done. You know, day-to-day transactions are good, but some of these one-off type transactions could take a little bit longer to just kind of understand and make sure that those happen. So I think district is working on putting in some procedure manuals, some checklists, some things that would be helpful in a transition in the future. Right. This is historically, we have provided the information on what are the differences between the financial statements that are internally prepared and presented to you, the preliminary before the audit is completed, and the audited financial statements. So this is the balance sheet. Once again, this is a very highly aggregated at the district level, not individual funds, but you can see the differences there. Primarily, you know, some of those related to the adjusting entries that were recorded as a result of the audit, but the biggest piece, once again, is the pension and OPEB liabilities and related items from the actuarial evaluation. So some of those in the liabilities, in particular, cash and investments, that was just reporting of the allocation between the funds, between the district, in this case, the district and Melrose, which is reflected as a fiduciary fund, which is presented separately. So a lot of the journal entries that were done as a result of the audit were really allocation between the funds of the district. So I'm just making sure that pension allocation is done correctly to the individual funds, and some of those other related intercompany, if you will, transactions. So they're aggregated in the difference column here as total. And that's the income statement effect, once again, of that. And at the end of the day, majority of that total difference on income loss relates to the pension and OPEB stuff. We do want to acknowledge the hard work that district employees always put in during the audit. And this year it took even longer than usual to complete the audit. We you know, had a lot more questions as we were going through, and it just took longer to complete the audit. So we appreciate everybody's help, Eric and Tommy and everybody else that had to was responding to our questions, providing information. Everybody was very helpful. It just took a few more iterations back and forth to get the information together and get the audit completed. And that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I do want to acknowledge that Dan Roberts is on the call with me as well. He was in charge of the audit as well, working with our team and the district team throughout the last 6 months audit.
Okay. Are there questions for Oka from the board?
Yeah, the statement and then a question for Olga. Finance committee went through this earlier in the week. We haven't seen this number of journal entries and pretty significant dollar changes between the internally generated financial statements and the audited. So we were assured by Moss Adams, and this is the question for Olga, that the audited financials do accurately represent the district performance. Is that an accurate statement?
That is an accurate statement. That is what our audit report will state. Yes. I
thank-
do want to highlight the fact that the audit report that we're issuing is materially correct. So during the audit, we do not test 100% of all the transactions. So there is always that risk that there is something the question that we didn't ask or the transaction that we didn't look at that may not be correct. But we do feel comfortable that materially financial statements are accurate. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So based on that, the finance committee would recommend approving the audit. The other couple of actions is, I think, some process to be built in to make sure these types of adjustments are made internally before it's turned over to the auditor next year, and also to get the audit started earlier in the year like we have in previous years. And then there's another component that we will bring to the board in either February or March, which would be to form an audit committee inside of the finance committee that would be able to talk directly to the auditors. Because it's a little, it's kind of what you do in a standard corporate environment. It's kind of awkward to have that conversation with all the staff involved as well. You want to be able to have a more candid conversation. So we'll be proposing that as a change to the charter of the finance committee. Anything on this, Bob? You were there too.
No, I think that's a good summary. I do want to recognize how hard it was for a brand new team to take this over from scratch with limited documentation. So while there are a lot of things that they found, I appreciate the fact that we have auditors that can find them. And I appreciate the fact that we have a very responsive staff that is going to do much better next year.
Yeah.
And I totally believe that they will. So I know Tommy and the rest of the staff was under a lot of stress for this, and they probably don't appreciate a report card that isn't straight A's. But I do believe we learned a lot and that they are accurate.
You know, this reminds me a little bit of our conversation as a board, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, about succession planning and some of the aspects to that. So I'm wondering if if it would be prudent to, you know, in the context of, it sounds like some of this was succession planning gap in there. And I'm wondering in other parts of our not financial, but, you know, operational business and things like that, if we have other things that we should revisit as part of this as well.
But certainly a different topic, but something we should consider and make sure we are covered. Yeah. Are there other board questions? And are there any questions from the audience?
Let's see anybody.
Okay, then is there I have just a procedural question. Pages 51 to 53 are blank. I assume that's the place where our management response would be inserted.
It says second page of opinion starts here.
That is our audit opinion. That's the space for our audit opinion. So this is there's two opinions if you go to the table of contents, I can show. So the first place for the audit opinion is the page 1. That's the opinion on the financial statements. And then further after the financial statements on pages 51 and 52, that's the report on internal controls that will disclose the material weakness. So.
Okay, so in the final report, we're approving this, but the final report will have something on those.
You will have our auditor's report, correct? Yes, so this is just a final draft of the financial statement.
And that's not something we approve, that's what you put in. We're approving that we believe the content of this is correct.
Yes.
Okay, good.
We went through this last year.
We did, but you have to remind me.
Why are these pages blank? Yeah.
Why is this night different?
Yeah.
Yes, we do it every year. And there's a reason. So is there a motion to approve the audit?
Yeah, motion to approve the audit.
Okay, I'd like to second that. We call for a vote then. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so it passes. Olga and Dan, thank you very much for all the work you put in on our behalf. We appreciate it.
Thank you
very
for your
much.
time.
Thank you.
See you next year, guys.
Bye.
Sooner than you think.
It will be sooner, yes, in the next few months.
Okay, then we're ready to move on to item 9B, finances.
Lots of scrolling, sorry. And first off, I want to point out, Bob actually caught this. We were having some PDF issues, but the very top, it says period ending, it says 9:30. This is for financials for 11/31/2023. So these are November numbers. So thank you, Bob, for finding that. But I wanted to make sure to point that out in front of everybody. But otherwise, I've been trying to build all of this as John recommended, really trying to break out the individual pieces that I found in there. And I can read through it, or if anyone has any questions.
I think probably the couple of things worth noting are in water and wastewater. Salaries and wages were lower in water due to more time spent in solid waste and unpaid leaves for those operators. And then in wastewater, it was lower due to a vacant position, which also pushes these things to be better than budget. So,
Which is nice. And also in electric, there was overage in operations and maintenance, but that was due to transformer testing, which is very necessary.
any questions?
Okay, are there any questions on this statement of variances?
No, I think this made it quite a bit easier to have this page up front because otherwise we'd have to kind of weed through the haystack to find all these issues and ask about them individually. So I think this works pretty well. So thanks, Tommy.
Wow. It's your idea. So I appreciate it. You and Doug really helped me finalize this and true it out. So we'll continue to get it better.
However, it does make it hard to make the board meetings longer.
We could go back and go through the consents.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
okay. We'll take that up. As Winston Churchill would say, we'll give that all of the consideration it deserves.
Yes.
I'm good with that.
With all due respect.
Okay, okay, do you want to move on to December preliminaries then?
Yes, I'm getting there. Yes, there we go. And just remind, I don't think Chris hasn't been through this a few times, but really this is only good for revenue. It's not good for anything else. It's just our revenue projection. So we don't have expenses fully in here by any stretch. So it's really just a how's our revenue looking kind of sheet. So.
Thank you. And that's why if there's I know we're shifting that so that our board meetings can come after. So eventually, once we have revenue in there, we give this to you. And so you can kind of see, obviously overall commercials up a little bit and residential's down a little bit for revenue. But this is about the time of year you start looking also at year to date. We're getting close. So we're a little bit below projected revenues year to date, 29,000 out of 5.4 million, which is pretty good.
Yeah, if you can do that on 2 feet of snow, you're doing really well, in my opinion.
And without much snowmaking.
Yeah, without
Yeah.
snowmaking being abandoned early on.
Right.
But saying that, kind of looking at the cash flow in December, we're still up 578,000 from budget. So we're at 2.5. And these are just numbers from the bank and from life.
So are you saying that our snowmaking revenues are down from last
Correct.
year?
Correct.
I think part of that's due to they had broken equipment, isn't it?
I don't believe that. I don't believe so. I believe it was due to the injury and
Oh,
Katalosha
okay.
being here for a
Okay.
while. But one thing I brought this to the attention, Tommy and I brought this to the attention of Finance Committee, but I also want to bring the attention of the full board because it is important. You'll notice our operating cash is creeping up and that's great. But I would note, and we've already prepared the budget assumptions for the next finance meeting, but We have two very large USDA notes coming due. We believe we can pay off one, which is about 700,000, and then there's going to be another one that's about 1.2 million, which we will have to roll over in all likelihood. But building this larger reserve right now facilitates paying that next fiscal year. You don't see it in this, but you will see it as we get closer. So we only do this for a year, but there's a reason that this is good to build and not to do something else with. So.
Exactly.
Any questions on the cash flow or December revenue? Okay, then we'll move on to 9C, operating and capital reserve policy, 695, page 132.
I got that one. I only had to go one page, Bob. I did good on that one.
Good view.
So this is this was brought up at finance a couple months ago. That our reserves, you know, have traditionally held around 1.5 million in December, which is our low point. And our target is 2 million. And if we've historically held it at 1.5 for all these years, why do we have it at 2 million was a question that was asked. We brought it back to the board, and the board directed finance to consider policy 695 and changing it. So we brought it back to finance, and they do recommend changing our target reserve to reflect our actual needs, historic needs, and targets to 1.5 million, which is 18.75%. So the only changes made to the policy, as you can see, we're here, and the target reserve of 18.5%, which is 1.5 million, which is what we've done for about the last 7 years. And I note that in the context of our reserve is much larger right now, but I also give the reason why we need that in this anomalous condition. So
Yeah, that was my question. I just wanted to clarify on your comment on the reserves relative to this. So we want to keep this up. How does this play out in terms of how you'll envision?
So I've run it much longer, the cash flow much longer than what we're showing here, and I've looked at what's coming due. I think the intent was always to pay off the loans that we could pay off with the reserves that were required to keep the 5% over that were required to continually build on our loan covenants. We will have to roll over some very large ones, but with this reserve target, we're going to be able to pay off the ones that I think we always anticipated paying off early. So I don't think it has an adverse effect on our ability to do so in the future. And it hasn't in the past. I will note that we just paid off, one last September, August. Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, but we did pay off one with the holding this 1.5, and we've paid off two prior to that. Right. So we've paid off, or we paid a total of 4. We paid 2 of the B, 3 of the B's out, and 1 of the C's have been paid off. So we have paid off 4 since I've been here.
So are there questions on the reserve? And what it means is that the amount over that we put into more investments, right?
Correct.
Okay. So it's not that we have a larger party or go to Mexico or anything.
No, I will note that I will note that I'm actually quite pleased with our transition to 5-star. Our operating reserve bank account with them is yielding more right now than LAIF. So we are letting that build more than transferring to LAIF.
Right.
So right now it's at 4% when LAIF is at 3.69. So we've been using the 5-star more than LAIF.
Okay.
Which gives us more earned money, which makes us able to pay off loans.
Right.
At the end of the day, this is all relatively liquid anyway. So moving it around, it was like 1.5 versus 2 with 2 days, the worst case for the $500,000 difference between this policy change. Okay. And it gives us the ability to earn more money on that.
Right. We have the opportunity on the interest earned. So
are there other questions in the policy? Chris, do you have one?
I'll simply ask the general question. Is it our intent or strategy to raise reserves, build reserves? I mean, clearly this takes it from 25 to 18, so that would say no. Yet with things like deferred maintenance in mind, is it our intent to build reserves?
It is our intent to build reserves, but what this reflects is our actual need for reserves. And this is particular, I mean, really, this is, at the end of the day, this really only impacts electric. I mean, it impacts
Well-
everything, but we put all our stuff in the same basket ostensibly. We track them separately, but our reserves are all in the same basket. They're accounted for which account they're for. But the bulk of this is electric. And to your question, I mean, yeah, are we concerned about deferred maintenance? Of course, but this is how we've run for 7 years. So, and it's been adequate to do a few projects here and there. Should we think about revisiting it if we get a big price tag, sticker shock on the master plans when they come through? That could be something to be considered.
I
Or
see.
what do those dollars amount look like for the next 20 years? And what does our debt service load look like to facilitate those projects? And where do they meet? And does this hurt us or not? That's a question we'll be able to answer after the master plans are completed.
Yeah,
think.
okay, that helps. So I'll look at these, at this 18% or this 1.5 as sort of a short term. It's what we've needed thus far, but it doesn't address larger issues that'll come out of the various master plans.
Correct.
Got it.
And this is a policy. It's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, obviously it was set at 2 million and we've been running at 1.5 for 7 years. This just reflects our practice, and we could change it to a higher later on. If we have a real sticker shock of the master plans, we could try and bump as our target is 25.
Okay. Are there any questions from the audience or on Zoom? I don't see any. Okay, is there a motion to approve the reserve policy 695?
Motion to approve policy 695.
Second.
And there's a second? Okay, all in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye. Okay, passes. All right, measure, ready to move on. Page 137, resolution 24-2, 5-star banking.
I'm going to say I find that very helpful, Bob. Thank you, by the way, for telling me the page number.
Oh,
And actually,
okay.
it's
I
actually quite helpful.
I looked them all up in advance
I'm glad that you took
because
notes like
I
that.
understood this meeting was going to be under a time pressure.
Yeah, 20 minutes to
No,
go.
that's sincerely appreciated. Thank you for
Okay.
doing that.
Cool.
This reflects what was done basically relative to snow removal, including the updated budget of snow removal after the departure of KMA. This is for the equipment loans for the two pieces of equipment we've already purchased out of reserves, but obviously that reserve is mostly electric. This will put the debt service squarely in snow removal, and electric will be made whole. And so one thing I will note is in our budget assumptions, we assumed a 6-year note. Basically, 5-star would only do a 5-year on this. Did talk to a couple other loan providers, and they were at 5 years on heavy equipment right now as well. So that was not uncommon. And our last Wells Fargo one we did was a 3-year for context. So I will update the budget assumptions to reflect that, as well as the budget as we go into that process to show what our debt service on this equipment and the snow removal fund will be. But this basically just formalizes what the board already directed staff to do, which was to finance this equipment.
Okay, and the two pieces of equipment you want to just mention what they are?
Oh, sure. So we have a mid-sized blower, which we use to take the weight off the shoulders of the road instead of tracklesses. It's prolonging the life of our trackless machines. And the other was the new McLean, which is equal to a trackless, only better, that we use mostly for driveways and lighter work. It's the only, what color is it? Red? The only red machine we have.
The loan is for 750, is that correct?
The loan is for 312,000 immediately,
Oh,
and our
okay.
total line of credit is 750,000. So what will happen as we finance additional equipment in the future, which is included in the last year's budget and will be talked about in this budget cycle, I can take out individual loans against that 750, but they'll be kept as a separate loan, so we can actually track them to the department which the equipment is purchased. So we have the full 750. We're exercising 312 against snow removal now, and then we'll have a balance of 338.
If the proceeds of that
Or
300,000 plus they go directly into the two machines, so the price.
We've already bought the machines.
They've already-
So this is just a reimbursement to the
Okay.
reserve fund from snow removal.
And they cost on the order of 150,000 each, it sounds like.
No, they were varied. And Rick, I'm gonna look for you to remember where I'm forgetting. I want to say one was 132 and one was 180.
In that
That sounds
ballpark.
right.
Is that pretty close?
That's good. Yeah.
The floor rate of 6% is the minimum they charge?
That is correct. And we assumed 8% in the budget, by the way.
Uh-huh.
So it's that, then the rate will be set on when we take this out. As will be for future ones. It will be
Mhm.
set at the time. It's not set in perpetuity. It's set at the time the draws happen ostensibly. The loans happen.
Okay,
And really, all this is doing is authorizing either Rick or I to enter into these agreements and all of the paperwork that goes with getting a loan.
okay. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, questions from the audience? I don't see any.
Nope.
Okay. Is there a motion to, for resolution authorize 24-02?
Yeah, a motion to approve, what was it,
24-02, Five Star Bank.
24-02.
Okay, second,
I'll second that.
okay, seconded by Peter. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. Good. All right, we'll move on to item 9E, Shell hedge pricing on page 143.
Good afternoon, everyone.
All right,
So this is just a recap of our results with Shell on hedge pricing for the forward purchase of power. You saw at the last board meeting, the expected rate. Shell came back day of with 29 different confirmations, all at the same price for the power. So we ended up at 7.685 cents per kilowatt hour. That was less than we had earlier expected. And the 2 cents per kilowatt hour increase that the board had discussed and approved at the last meeting is sufficient to cover this. Because I had already done it, I put in an exhibit here that shows the breakdown of each month and how much power on peak and off peak is going to be delivered for that same price. And the execution went relatively seamlessly, although it took us a couple of back and forths to get the process down. And this is a lot more confirmations than we've ever done before. So I would be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
So did the rate go to the full 2 cents or what was the 1 point?
Yes, it went to
One.
the full 2
Okay.
cents. As we talked about at the last meeting, and I think Frank Petrocelli was the one who was really brought it to the forefront. We still have 20% on peak and 50% off peak that are going to be day ahead. And this provides us with that
Yeah.
comfort. This was not significantly less than what we had brought back in the original guesstimate. It was close enough that we believe that the 2 cent followed the board's intent, and that will be reflected in the next billing cycle, which started on for everything from January 1st forward.
the other thing I want to just remind people, that's our wholesale price. We lose about 12% in the delivery. So the actual cost to a customer kilowatt is about 12% or so higher than this. Okay, this is informational. Are there any questions? Okay, good. Thank you. Why don't we move on then to the next item, performance reporting.
Right, performance reporting through December. You can see that we did have a large uptick in December for electric sales, which was right on track with what we were budgeting for. Our unidentified system losses for the month of December in electric were at 2%. We're sitting at 8% for the year. And just historical knowledge, we tend to see smaller losses percentage-wise in the winter months because we have much more power going through our wires.
We've seen 2% before.
We have, but it is low.
I was
It is-
shocked.
It is low. This reflects some minor pickup of getting to the backside for the first
Yeah,
time.
so there's some
So-
additional
right.
kilowatts that we build this month
Exactly.
that may have been delivered earlier.
That's correct.
Okay.
And then for propane, a good month in propane, although less sales than we budgeted for. We metered about 2.8 1.86 million cubic feet. Our loss is -4%. And looking over to the year to date, we're approximately 0% loss for the year. That number does fluctuate positive and negative, but usually sits in the positive to -2% range. If we look at water, for water for the month at our wells, we produced 1.7 million gallons. We metered all but 13% of that. Our year-to-date total loss for water is 14%. This does include snowmaking, what limited snowmaking was done at Timber Creek.
Could you just explain the gap, this 13%? What is it that we are unable to meter?
Well, we don't know. We don't know everything. So there are some things that we do know that are unmetered. For instance, the district facilities are not metered. They could be metered, but the cost of that has always been larger than we want for the certainty. We also have the issue of the gallons that we pump from our wells go into our storage tanks. So some amount of timing can be seen, and we do see some fluctuations. You saw -2% last month. And for anything else, we do flushing of hydrants for maintenance of the system.
Flushing hydrants?
Yes, so we'll run water out of the hydrants at high pressure to clear water out of the system, remove debris. And there are various things that aren't metered or aren't estimated completely correctly. As
Do we
for any,
suspect we have a lot of loss simply in the water transmission system because of historic legacy pipe problems and so forth?
I would say no. I think the biggest thing we have is the way our tanks are metered. So if a tank starts out full and we use that water in a subsequent month, that's going to give you a huge skew of up to 900,000 gallons, right? If we start with a tank on empty, it'll be the exact inverse of that problem. I think that's probably the biggest problem in this system. But leaks are an issue, but they're not, I don't think they're the biggest portion of that. I really think it's the tanks. And, we could change that by metering tanks and trying to do some subtraction things. But again, what is the outlet on that 12-inch meter?
it's 10.
10. So a 10-inch mag meter probably would cost, I don't know, over 100,000, maybe 200,000. And it doesn't provide anything other than making this make more sense.
Over a 12-month period, you would kind of expect that the tank variations would even out, wouldn't you?
Yes.
I would think so.
Yeah.
I mean, generally, yes, within some, obviously, but
So
you're always
which is
gonna have
probably-
1 month skewed, but yes, 12, it's gonna be significantly less based on the total volumetric
Yeah.
movement.
So this is most likely uses of water that aren't metered.
Correct, or small leaks, but like Eric said, we do typically see even small leaks over an amount of time. So it is unlikely that a lot of this is just actual system leaks, and much more likely that we have underestimated some of our internal use, or we have some unmetered issues.
The 2% for electrical or the similar gap for propane, are those larger concerns, just that we lose lose in the transmission? If you could just say a word briefly about this gap between meter and actual.
For electric, it's money lost to us. We would like to meter all of there is no opportunity for electricity to leak in the system, because it would just fault. So this is money lost, and we would like to find those. We've had a project in the past where we went and tried to track down those. That's something that's ongoing. Propane can and does leak, but we usually find out about it pretty quickly. And so propane is the one I worry the least about on performance reporting, because it fluctuates fairly widely because of temperature and pressure. Electricity is potentially something that we may see improvements on when the backside line goes in. when we find additional unmetered usage,
Okay,
and that sort of thing.
thank you.
The other thing we should explain is the transformers themselves produce heat, and that's lost electricity. And so when they aren't efficiently being utilized, you can have more heat per unit served. And that's why on a month where there's a lot of activity, that heating them is a small impact. Correct?
That's exactly
Yeah,
right. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you.
All right, and then lastly, wastewater. You can see from our influent meter, which is the meter at the wastewater plant, we had 1.6 million gallons come in. Of that, actual metered, which is from our water meters, is 1.2 million. And that's a 24% unidentified use. So this in wastewater is not a loss, it's extra water getting into our system. 24%, that's pretty high for December. But we had a lot of moisture in the ground and some rain, so it's not completely out of the ballpark. 34% year to date, I for wastewater.
And that is a source of concern.
It is.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And that is all I have for performance reporting, unless there are any questions.
I'd just like to draw your attention to the next slide. I find this is really helpful because it gives you a visual to compare year over year for each month and see what's going on. We can
This for my
either,
house.
what's that?
I did this for my bill.
Yes, right. So I find that interesting. Electric usage isn't highly correlated with temperature, but this can also be displayed with residence days. And then you can see exactly that's why the blue bar is lower. We had less residents than previous year, and our peak year was COVID. If it ever comes back, we'll have huge increases in residency. Presumably, but I'd hope we don't. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
All right, so item G then is future board meeting dates. So I have to start out with an apology. When the proposal was for the third Friday of the month, I remember that is when I have my piano club, and that was moved to accommodate it. So when someone said the fourth Friday, I didn't even think about the fact that I also have commitments on that I can't avoid. So I would like to ask people's forgiveness and suggest either that we go to the third Friday of the month or the first. And I would probably recommend the first Friday. And the rationale is if we do that, then the finances will always be complete and there'll be time for finance to review them, to make corrections as needed. And every other piece of business that we discuss can have, what matters is that it's on a regular basis. So I think that would make the finances always available and might even allow for the first board packet to come out earlier than we currently get it. So it might make things run smoother.
You're proposing that the board meeting be the first Friday of each month.
Yeah.
And previously it's been like now the second, and we wanted to make it later. Now we're going to put it to the first.
Yes, I think of it as being 4 weeks later as opposed to 1 week earlier, because it would have the financials for,
Does that have any impact on when you want committee meetings to have happened?
It actually works best with the way the committee meetings have been moved so far. We still have 2 committees to discuss moving their dates, which is planning and operations, and the only 2 left. But with board being the first, that would give whatever the committees generate or want to get out to the board the most time to get it back to the board and to have direction immediately from the board from the week prior. Most of them will move to the second or third week. I anticipate that'll probably be the same with the operations having to move earlier, but other than that, after the 4th week, move it to somewhere else. But it actually works the best for the committees. It's most time.
So again, I apologize for causing the rework.
And it's snowing.
All right,
Here we go.
and it's right on schedule. It's 3 o'clock. That's what they predicted. So
Okay with me.
it's okay. Okay, Doug? First round?
And this would still, I think we talked about this starting in April, the
Yeah,
change
I
in
would start
general.
sometime in the future that's convenient for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
So April is maybe
It could be April 5th.
would we start in May then?
Yeah, I'll be gone. I'm out of the country. First week of April.
You want to start in May? Is that what I'm hearing?
So it'd start May 3rd
Sounds good.
in time for Cinco de Mayo.
I'll be out of town then too, but we can Zoom.
May 3rd?
I will be out
Yeah.
of town in May as well, picking up
I
my
could-
daughter from college.
I could Zoom to the meeting in May. April wouldn't work because I'm in another hemisphere.
Okay.
You want to move it to June?
Um,
I think May's-
Or we could do it in April and just have a special one in May, or we could just do it in June. I mean, just,
We could do May. I just have to do a Zoom participation.
I mean, there's nothing to say we can't have a special meeting instead of a regular meeting, and these occasions, we've done it before around board member schedules, so. I mean, I would almost recommend keep it in April, but we can just make April be the one off. You know, or keep it, whatever, I mean,
oh, April 5th, I'll be on an airplane.
okay, then I guess we won't be doing that.
Yeah,
Just,
I'll be in,
Start
I'll be
in
in
May.
Vietnam, so.
Started in
that'll
May.
work.
Started
Why
in May.
don't, why
okay,
don't we start in May and I'll give you a chance to
I'll do a Zoom.
see how Zooms work.
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, your feelings on this?
Warm.
Warm?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's fine.
fine. And Peter?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, again, I apologize for the rework.
okay.
Just, Eric, just thinking to your comment on the committee scheduling of that, if this is the first Friday and then under 7 days later would be all of the committees?
No, not all the committees, but some of the,
Well, like, okay, well.
the committees you care about.
The committee that I care about right now is
Third-
currently.
You're on the second
I'm on the
Thursday.
second Thursday.
You're on the second Thursday, and personnel is the second Monday.
Well, I guess my point is, if there were actions coming from the board meeting that need to be agendized for the committees, is that enough time to, like?
Yeah.
So you,
Is the short answer for personnel would be the only one that would be impacted. I could still do an agenda on Monday before 2:30 for communications.
okay,
It would be tied, obviously. So if you want to,
I guess what I'm asking, and we can talk about this in, for
I can put it
communications,
on
but.
communications
But it's,
agenda again.
yeah, to maybe move it to the third week, so then that way there is enough time to agendize anything.
Sure.
And then, I like to submit my reports and then get that out, that would be enough time to get them to the board packet.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the committee meetings moving again. I'm just saying,
Understood,
I think personnel is probably the one that's impacted least. It's probably the least relevant for anything. So I think it'd be okay.
okay,
But if you guys, we can revisit that at the next personnel meeting if that wants to move too. And if you want to move them all to the third week, I mean, it's only ostensibly four committees to meet with regularity and 5 in total. So
Okay.
having them all in the third week is not really the end of the world by any stretch.
understood
Next meeting is Friday the 9th on February.
for us right now.
Yes,
Yes.
it's Friday. Yeah, February 9th is our next meeting. Okay. Then we will, beginning in May, we'll move to the first Friday, which is actually where we started years ago. So a return to the future. Okay, thank you very much. Item 10, major projects updates.
Let's see. So really nothing has changed from last month. I will note that the request for proposals for the water master plan went out this week to 6 engineering firms with requested return of those proposals for February 16th. And then staff will review those and bring back our recommended consultant to the board. So that one is moving along. The needs assessment is completed. It will be the planning committee reviewed it last month. We'll be looking at it again. Proceeding with the low income at the next planning meeting as well. But other than that, everything is probably where we expect it to be. And the wastewater treatment plant is continuing to move on schedule.
Okay, and in terms of the low income program, we did get an email, it didn't make it into the board packet asking for an update.
Yeah, and that it's with planning.
Okay,
So it'll be
So-
on a future planning agenda to create a
to
draft
actually create the
program
actual structure.
and then bring it back to the board for consideration whether or not to adopt it.
Okay. I might suggest it might be a courtesy just to send an email to people who filled out the survey. Thanking them, letting them know what our plans
Surveys
are.
were ostensibly anonymous, and I would be very uncomfortable doing so.
Oh, they are anonymous. Yeah, never mind.
We did a third
Let
party.
me pretend I didn't say that, although I'm sure everyone heard it.
I'm not, he's not planning anymore. You're looking at me.
What?
You're looking at me. I'm not planning anymore.
Oh,
You're looking at me. You have to look that way. I'm not planning either.
let me know when I can look somewhere else. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Okay, anything else? Any questions on the major projects? Okay, then general managers report.
I was sick for 16 days and the holidays all occurred in there and I was sick during the whole time. So that was great. So we've begun our 5-star transition, which has been working out swimmingly. Most accounts have been transferred over in totality with the only 3 remaining with BMO, and we will slowly phase those out as well. I've completed all my quarterly board member meetings, which was good for those who wanted to meet. I've done that. Again, the monthly CMUA regulatory and legislative meeting, which was actually probably the more interesting ones. There's a lot of stuff potentially coming out that we need to be concerned about that's going to have a unfunded mandate impact on the district. So I'm following those closely, particularly with regards to the one that's most concerning right now is the one with regards to electric and funding funding an EV charging rate. And how that would be implemented will be very interesting to see what we're going to do. An EV charging rate.
We have.
CARB is currently considering that under their rulemaking process, and CMUA is pushing back that it should be a legislative process, not a bureaucratic process.
And so we would then need to have a tariff, an EV tariff.
We would have to subsidize EVs is what the initial discussion is, but it's in its infancy right now. So I don't.
Interesting.
Yeah. We did meet with USDA regarding our Out Valley loans, which I've talked about already, but we did meet with them. And I would remind all board members, to the exception of my good pupil, to get your board ethics and sexual harassment training done by the end of the month. It is required for you to do so by January 30th. So if you didn't get an email, you did. Actually, I have copies of them all, but it may have gone to your spam. Look for something from info@csda.net for your ability to log in. Everyone got them.
Everyone got, so I thought it was something. There was no notification that we need to do this, so I would just say as a communication in the future, it would be helpful if there
I've
were.
already talked with Brittany and we'll come out with a precursor from her saying, check your spam folders. Here's what's coming.
It wasn't a spam folder. It was that it said it buried the lead quite a bit. In the email. And so I think it's more of, hey, you will get an email that says this in the future would be
Agreed and
helpful.
already implemented.
Thank you.
But do get those done.
Did you see the emails?
No,
Oh, okay, so
Just check your email. It came out on December 28th. So
we have to have certification.
you have to do your ethics training and you have to do your sexual harassment training. Every 2 years, all board members have to do those.
And what's available?
the
It's
email,
online.
Well, the email tells you.
it tells you
Email tells you everything.
exactly
It's all
how
online.
to do it, but
Okay,
just
no,
log
I
in.
didn't receive
why don't
it.
you check with Brittany if you don't see it?
Yeah, I have copies of all of them. So all of you did get them, but check your junk mail just in case. It's info@csda.net. So
And then one little twist I had at least is, you're supposed to log in, but you don't have an account. So you put in your email, then you say, I forget my password, although you never had one. And then it takes it
Yeah.
from there.
So it requires you to lie,
Yes.
and then you
exactly.
get locked.
as part of your ethics training.
But on the ethics, it says this is the one situation where you can misrepresent to the public. That is kind of funny that.
So it's like a webinar that you do online
It's a webinar that you just watch. It's pre-recorded.
and then they give you a test.
One of them just, you have to certify that you stayed awake for the whole time.
Okay, and which one is that?
That's the ethics.
You have to do them both, Peter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
Nice try.
still have to figure out all the new rules regarding
Really,
the
this
proper
highlights
pronouns.
climax, and that's what
Yeah.
That's in the
I mean, I've-
section, that's
I've
in
done
the
these, But
section.
we all have to do them every 2 years.
Yeah.
It's new. It's a new. So if you recall, in the olden days, you only had to do ethics every 4. Basically, when you took it, now it's every 2. Sexual harassment for all managers and board members is every 2, and it's been that way for 5 years, Rick. 4 years now, Brandy.
And we all have to do this except for the California legislators, right?
Supreme Court
I
justice.
have no
Is that
comment.
right?
They're supposed to do it too.
Supreme Court justices don't have to do anything.
Yeah, I think it's only the Supreme Court that's
Yeah.
not held to any particular standard.
So anyway, so please get those done and get that. Brittany will get the confirmation when they're done.
After you cry.
So please get them done ASAP. It impacts your ability to sit as a board member. So please get it done. And that's all I have.
Can I, yeah, Rick, obviously next, come on up. Can you just comment on the electric vehicle did we
Uh-oh.
purchase it? I thought it was really interesting, so if you could just. Or is
You're
Rick gonna
stealing
cover
Rick's
that?
thunder.
all right.
Rick's gonna cover it. Okay,
Good.
all right.
No, he had it. I am not gonna steal Rick's thunder. I'm like, Bob, I'm gonna let Rick
Okay.
have his moment in the sun.
All right, good. Rick, operations report.
Oh, thanks. The other thing that the board's required to do is the Form 700. That's supposed to be coming up soon, right?
That I forget the timing on
That's usually
that.
in
Is it
April.
New Year or is it fiscal year? It's New Year.
It's
Yeah,
New
so I think
Year.
we'll have to do those soon.
For operations, I've got a few things. Wastewater treatment update. As Eric talked about, the wastewater treatment plant's being remodeled, of course. And they've completely gutted the office area. So if you're familiar with the office, it's gone. They left the bathroom for some reason, but I'm sure they're going to take the walls down with the drywall and all that stuff down. So that'll be good. During the holiday period, we did have a hiccup at the plant, and at least that you're not aware of it because we were able to resolve through the work of Aquaseer Controls. They were on site on the 28th to solve a filtrate pump issue as well as a blower issue. Without these devices, it could have taken the plant offline, which would result in going to emergency storage and a lot of bad things. But it didn't happen, so we're really pleased about that. Aquaseer will be back in January to do further diagnostics with other issues going on in the plant, including the plant's influent meter. And I'll certainly report back to the board on what's going on at the plant in February. For propane,
Before we move on, can update on the membranes that I feel like we were trying to figure out.
so we're in negotiations with, it's not
Corvallis.
Corvallis. They've changed the company name and we're in negotiations with them on the membranes they tried to deliver. And so the contracts were sent and some of the contract didn't include, for example, technician time as well as freight. And so Brandy, Eric and myself are working with them now. And so once we get close to finalizing that contract, we'll certainly let you know what it looks like. The numbers are still roughly the same, but so that's the good news. The bad news is they keep excluding things that are important, like making sure that the manifolds are guaranteed to work this time so the membranes can go in. And Brandy, you have anything else you want to add with that?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay,
So that it's not Coke anymore?
No, they got bought out by Corvallis.
yeah.
Okay,
No kidding.
doesn't sound very promising so far.
The product itself hasn't changed. I mean,
All the
It's the
details.
same- technology,
Yeah.
the shape and size has changed. That's why the manifolds were different. That's why we had such a hiccup this year.
Yeah.
But the technicians, the team that does the work has, as far as I know, has remained the same.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but we'll get through this and we'll have to time this out with the improvements of the treatment plan as we've identified before to make sure they go in properly and there isn't a change order last minute from the plant remodel. But I'll bring it back in February and give you an update. Any other questions about wastewater or water? I guess I don't have really anything for water. For propane, I'd like to give you an update. Our Our manager for the department has installed a simple remote read device, which on the safety side, the risk manager side of me, the district, is great because in years past, I've had the pleasure of escorting or helping Brandy literally dig up to the tanks, get to the top of tanks, dig down and look at the device to read the propane tank levels. Now we can do that out of our vehicle. Just another measure for us to understand how much is in the tank and to see issues like if the tanks aren't equalizing like we had last year. So far, everything's been working well. We've also working with 2 different vendors now. It's not just Kiva Energy, with most of the product coming from Stockton or the Bay Area side of the hill, which means that they have to deal with closed Carson Spur. We're getting all of our deliveries from the Reno area, the Sparks area. So the likelihood of the road being open is much greater here, as well from 2 different vendors. And so we have a primary vendor as well as kind of the backup vendor. So far, the weather's cooperated, and the roads have cooperated, and we survived a good holiday period with good, decent tank loads. And so again, big changes from last year. So we appreciate the hard work the staff's doing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think that it'll be accurate, the remote reading?
So far, it's been pretty close, and
The
this,
the temperature difference and everything.
yeah, it's just a small device that we're using internally. But in worst case scenarios, we get another big winter last year. I'm not putting staff in harm's way, essentially
Right.
in a hole
yeah.
leading off a tank.
It sounds great. It just sounds it's
So
accurate.
it's been a good tool so far, and we'll keep playing with it.
Question on the propane sourcing. Are we going to notify the ratepayers with the good news that our propane readiness is much stronger than it was last year? This seems like good news that people will want to hear.
We really haven't changed the operations of propane at all. We've just
I just heard you say
utilized a
Carson
second
Spur.
supplier, but we used them last year as well. So it is good news, but I'm afraid as soon as I send an email out saying, hey, things are better in propane, things will go bad, because we still have mechanical issues with vaporizers, and we're putting in capital, replacing the old water bath with another vaporizer. So there are still a lot of things going on in propane. So I don't want to say everything's okay, because it's really, we're working toward making it better every day.
I just generally feel that as we are making those efforts and improvements and putting ourselves in a better position, the more we let the ratepayers, the market know, there's no reason you can't also hedge with risks that haven't gone away. But I mean, I'm hearing you've made a significant change. Carson Spur in itself is a change. And anyway, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, and it's something we could further discuss in the communications committee as well, on how we want
I'd
to.
say it's safer we have more, we're better equipped to deal with road closures.
Right.
Just leave it at that.
And with large snow loads, safer operation with remote read. I mean, I think what Chris's point is that we've had some tough situations and narrow spots, especially in the last year. And so if we can talk about all of the things that we are doing to make things safer and more reliable, but let's highlight that and not just always have to have communications be, oh God, we're running out of propane or something like that. I think I'm summarizing what you're saying in some ways.
Okay.
I think that would be a newsletter type of thing that could go out at some point.
I understood. Okay. Any other questions about propane? Moving on to snow removal.
I'm sorry, just so I know in the future, what are the names of the 2 companies again? It's Kiva was the past, and you've told me before, so I apologize.
Hunt's the other one.
Hunt and is
Hunt.
Kiva still in
It's
the?
Hunt Sons and Kiva are
Hunt,
2
okay.
primary providers.
Thank you. Yeah.
As Eric was talking about before with our snow removal equipment, pretty much all our snow removal equipment is working except for T4. It just a couple days ago, the drive shaft actually broke. But we have a replacement shaft on the shelf if we need it, or actually we're going to be reinstalling that shaft in there.
Didn't break the shear pins first.
No. I can get all the details of why we think it broke, but basically it
Okay.
broke. There was an operator error. It wasn't like we hit anything. It failed. But I don't know how many hours were on that shaft, so maybe it was
Yeah.
time. But we do have a replacement part on the shelf up in the shop next door, as well as we could steal a shaft out of one of the dead tracklesses or machines in our powerhouse. But everything else is up and running. We were supposed to receive our RPM last week, and then it got to Tuesday and then Thursday. The RPM is the biggest blower that we have, and you'll see Bill has one that they use in the big parking lots. But with the amount of snow that we've seen this winter, we really wouldn't have used it yet. But that mid-sized blower that we're paying for, wow, that thing's amazing. It blows farther than our larger blower. It still hasn't gotten through the broken period, but staff loves that machine. It really is taking the wear and tear off the tracklesses, especially during the side of the roads and the parking paths.
And it's the biggest one we deploy right at the moment.
Yeah, and it's ample. I mean, we could,
Yeah.
with what 60 inches of snow this season, it's been minimal,
It's been
but
minimal.
it's
It's got
been,
a longer chute too.
yeah,
I think that's the biggest difference is
yeah,
the design of the chute makes it shoot further.
yeah, staff loves it. We love it and we appreciate using it. But we schedule staff according to storm cycles. Snow removal understands that they don't have a normal 2 days off like the rest of the world. They really shift and schedule their schedules around for storm periods to try to optimize as many staff members here when we need them, but also not incur a ton of overtime. And so far this year, we've only had, I think, 2 hours per operator for overtime, period. Where last year, it was a lot different. And keeping that in mind for tomorrow night, for example, we know that snow is coming in now through tomorrow. We'll run a day shift, but we'll also do a swing shift tomorrow. So we'll have one blade on the ground tomorrow night, tomorrow afternoon. So that just to ensure that the roads and the HOA contracts, people can drive on the roads. We will not be doing individual driveways, but we want to maintain and ensure emergency traffic can happen if we need it. And then you'll see the full complement on Sunday morning. This is a very quick moving storm. The predictions from NOAA from a lot to a little, but bottom line is we'll be prepared, we're ready, and staff's ready to go.
Is it appropriate to discuss this just for a couple of minutes now, a little bit more? May I ask?
You have a question for me? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to overdo this, but so for example, I heard you say there'll be a day shift tomorrow, just to take this storm as an example for the larger trend, which is, and this has been a theme in communications committee, for example, the larger question is how we communicate our snow removal MO, our policies and practices to the market. And so just to take this as an example, tomorrow, big storm starts momentarily. You said there'll be a day crew and there'll be a swing shift. And then we have these text alerts that come to many people who subscribe that let them know exactly how many operators are, on the job at the moment. A day, you said one blade on the ground. I think I heard you say, I don't know what that means, one blade on the ground.
Forgive me for just talking shop talk. Basically, we have the smaller trackless machines, and there's one McLean that do driveways and tight areas. They articulate in the middle. We have 3 blades. Blades can be from 18 to 16 feet in different sizes, but the blade is used to basically push the snow to the corner and the edges, clear off the roads, make it, you can see pavement.
I heard you say the street will have at least one lane cleared. You referenced emergency, and I heard you say driveways not.
Right.
Just help me understand why not driveways?
Well, when we have a full crew, we have 4 or 5 trucks out there. We also run a blade on the road to keep the roads open. That's 6, 7 people. So if I provided that service 24/7, I'd have to probably double or if not triple my labor. And that's going to increase your contract prices, the HOA contract prices by that much as well. So we try to optimize our staff, our equipment, perform snow removals on at least a daily basis, which is much better than a lot of areas in the Tahoe Basin area. And then when it gets to critical emergency situations, then we provide more staff during, like, for example, during a swing shift tomorrow to basically maintain operations and traffic.
If we were having heavy snow in this storm, like say 3/4 or a full inch an hour, let's say at 6 o'clock tonight, into the night, through the night, would you expect, should the consumers expect that through that kind of heavy snow all night long, the road would be cleared? Or should one just expect that, no, at 2 a.m, I'm sorry, when it snows like that, it will not be cleared? What should one expect?
It depends on the snow, depends on the wind, and it depends on the labor. There is no A squared plus B squared equals C squared at snow removal.
Yeah.
Trying to apply the logic of wastewater or water, which has a formulaic thing, to snow removal is a fool's errand. So we know it's going to be roughly not terribly windy, kind of light snow. That's why we're going to kick over the road Saturday night. And then Sunday, the full crew will be in and they'll be hitting the roads and the driveways after all the snow has fallen. But that could be completely different if it was Wednesday when we had wind all day and the snow didn't come in until, ostensibly didn't come in until maybe like 5. I drove out of here at 7, no problem. I mean, it was a little slushy on Kirkwood Meadows Drive and Loop Road. No problem at 7 to 8 o'clock at night. But our crew had already worked a full day that day wrenching, and we had no one on a night crew because the storm was supposed to come in during the day, which it didn't.
Yeah.
So so we do the best we can with the weather forecast we have, but they're not worth the electrons they kill to generate that forecast. So.
And keeping in mind safety for our operators, because if we're out there trying to move snow and like 1 inch an hour is really not a big deal. It's 6, 8, 12 inches an hour. That's when usually it's whiteout conditions. Even if you're out there, you can't see what you're doing. It's just not safe for the operator.
Right.
We're going to hit cars. We're going to get into things. So, we're going to pull back until things settle down and then go back at it. We don't have the luxury like Caltrans. They can close Carson Spur, Carson Pass, go back to the shop and wait for it to stop. Us, we're trying to do like Vail. We're trying to keep things open, but also keeping our staff safe.
Well, with apology to those, Eric, Doug, who heard it yesterday, I'd simply say for the whole board that I think it's imperative that we do more to communicate what those policies and complexities and contingencies are. I don't think anyone disputes what Eric says, which is it's always different and the forecasts aren't always reliable. Your point, safety has to be an issue. Driveways don't need to be plowed at 3 a.m. No one disputes those things, but I think it's imperative that we let customers know at least what our view on these things and what we want our policy to be. And so, for example, like after the storm tomorrow morning, or I guess if there were a storm all night, one should not expect the driveway to be clear at 5 a.m. But should one expect, if I've signed up through the alert system, should I expect that by 8 a.m. My driveway will be cleared? Those kind of things that people want to know.
Understand.
I think we should close it here and keep moving.
Okay.
Okay.
So moving on to fire department, just a brief call review. For 2023, we had 122 calls, which is historically kind of our call average before COVID, which I wasn't too surprised to see. Of those, in December, we had 11 calls. Most all of them were vehicle-related injury accidents. There were a couple non-injuries. We had one smoke alarm caused by actually wood smoke in a hallway of a resident home. They didn't open up the damper on their fireplace and it set the alarm off. And then we had one actual broken arm in the meadow. Someone's broke their arm cross-country skiing. And so it was kind of scary because they dispatched it as this location, 3354, the fire station. And lo and behold, it was just out in the meadow. But it's pretty unusual for us to get cross-country injury accident calls like that. But I'm pleased to announce that we didn't miss any calls last month and that the on-call schedule, thanks to the captains and the 17 volunteer firefighters we have, we're on an upswing and we've got good coverage. So, and looking at January, it looks like the on-call schedule is being covered as well. Further on with the fire department, as you may have heard, either on the street or maybe I mentioned it in the forum a little bit, we did receive a 2017 new to us, used fire truck from Rough and Ready Fire Department. It's a Type 2 truck, but it has the Type 1 capabilities, including the most important thing, a 4-wheel drive. It's down in the fire bay now. We're slowly outfitting it to put it in service. Next week, we'll put in a radio system. I still have to order hoses and a bunch of other equipment, but we're going to try to transfer as much equipment we can off our primary lead engine, engine 93, over to this new used truck to us, so we don't spend a ton of money, but thankful to the 501c3 for granting us funds to be able to purchase the truck and honor the community's promise that we had to the community, as well as getting us a new tool, because the engine 93, our primary truck, is really, things are starting to happen to it. And so it's going to be nice to have hopefully both these trucks back in service 100% and have some redundancy up here without having to borrow a truck from Eastern Alpine County that we've done a couple times in the last couple of years.
So we hang on to the old truck for some extended period of time?
The old truck will replace engine 193, the Wildcat 4-wheel drive big truck downstairs. We'll surplus that truck, and then those funds will come back into the fire department as well.
Okay.
And then further along with the fire department, unless there's anything about kind of operations with fire department and call volumes, and I want to let you know that we about Alpine County Title III funding, which I've kind of mentioned in the past. And basically Title III, I'm just going to briefly give you a synopsis of what it is. In 2000, Congress passed the Secure Rural Schools and Community Self-Determination Act 2000. In years when the Secure Rural School Act is reauthorized by Congress, Title I and Title III payments are made from the Forest Services to the states. The counties then distribute the payments to eligible. The state then distributes the funds to eligible counties, including Alpine County. And so Title I funds are secured for schools and roads. Title II is special projects on federal lands. And then Title III's, more importantly, is county funds for specific purposes. In Alpine County, some of the funds were allocated to defensible space projects, such as chipping. So through the support of Supervisor Terry Woodrow and Alpine County Wildfire Protection Project Coordinator Clint Celio, the Alpine County Board of Supervisors authorized $3,000 for our chipping program for 2022, and also $3,000 for our chipping program in 2023, which fully reimburses the district for labor and equipment and costs for chipping. So we're incredibly grateful to Alpine County for the $6,000 for our dispensable face program, and we hope to continue to receive funds from Alpine County in the future. But again, thanks Terry Woodrow and Clint Celio for making sure that we were included with these funding. And then finally, AFPD also gave us our reimbursement for our mutual aid agreement with them. As you may or may not know, we received $2,200 a year for annual compensation for insurance coverage, as well as $72 per call. There were 23 calls for last year in Amador County, so we got a check actually just today, a reimbursement check from. And that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the board.
Wasn't there an EV truck that you were going to talk about?
Oh, that's right. Pleased to announce that we picked up a 2023 Ford Lightning electric truck. And Eric actually got to go down and pick it up. What do you think of it?
It was a pickup truck. But the one thing I will say, so we got the standard range as was suggested previously, because we have a 1.875 square mile service area. Makes sense to get a standard range. So Tommy and I went down and picked it up, and then Tommy drove it back here. When he left Folsom, it was, and correct me on this, Tommy, I think it was 86 miles from Folsom Ford to here. The range that it told us we had was 192 miles. And when he came in on fumes with 9 miles left.
No, 22
Yeah.
miles left.
Oh, 22 miles left. Oh, so it was not
Well,
quite fumes, but it was
The
almost fumes.
calculation assumes you're on a level surface,
Yeah,
not going
so,
up.
I'm glad to report that we didn't have to get a generator out and charge this thing on Highway 88. That would have been terribly embarrassing. But it is up here now. We do have our Type 2 charger installed inside our maintenance shop. Yeah, so we do have that now.
Yeah, so budgeted item, it's gonna get.
That was under
assigned-
budget too. It was
Yeah,
under budget by
under
about 20 grand.
Yeah, exactly. And it's gonna assign to our water, wastewater department.
Yep,
Right.
that is correct. Yes,
Gee whiz information. At the Pioneer Hotel, they have a charging station behind the Connex.
Pioneer Hotel.
Really?
Yeah, the Pioneer Inn
is that,
Suites, or no, I don't know what it's called now. They changed the name. Amador Suites or.
yeah, is that with the last remodel and they repainted the annex building there? Okay, good to know. So it's behind the annex.
Yeah, it's
building
behind.
By old Gallagher's.
Right, it's facing the Plate 88 restaurant.
Oh, from right where the end, like a Gallagher's was facing. Okay,
Plate 88.
yeah, now we know if we ever have to drive that thing down, we have a place to hit.
That's it.
Plate 88
Go
is
get-
good food.
Go get lunch.
That's good.
Well, if you're going downhill, you can go to Jackson too. Cool, thank you.
Oh, I'm gonna be. Very
okay.
excited.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, okay, we'll move on to standing committee reports then, start with finance.
We covered everything that we covered in finance already.
Okay, and operations,
So we didn't meet.
didn't mean, okay, communications.
Can I ask a question about operations? Or just in terms of one of the things, remember we talked about like metrics and like snow removal and things like that at some point. And I was just wondering if that was on operations plate to think about that, to have some more objective metrics. I know, you get requests all the time about, hey, this was the last time this was plowed. And I'm just trying to think of easy ways that we could point to, some of the stuff that we're talking about with communications and plans and just having metrics like, you didn't plow this into 5 days. Well, we did when the last time.
I think you had a question for operations.
My
so-
question was, how is that
Okay.
question, is that being on the agenda for operations to think about metrics to show to our customers? Is that on the agenda at some point?
That was big. We haven't had an operations meeting yet, but that was gonna be
We,
the first.
we could
thing
put it on the agenda
Okay,
Thank you.
and we can discuss it
Fantastic. Thank you.
okay,
at our next meeting, which we will schedule
mentioned this earlier.
sometime.
okay, communications, there's
Yeah.
in the board,
I will direct
anything you want to add?
Obviously detailed report.
I would like to be meticulous and so I can remember.
It's a bad thing.
Yeah, I would just say, I'll direct you to this. I think at a high level, there are a lot of ideas.
Page 150.
If you want to refer to like the future topics there, and I think at a high level, one of the things that we are going to be talking about, and I think bringing back to the board in the near future, is trying to prioritize and, in my professional life, project management and product management, things like that, of here are all the things that we could do. Here are all the things, website content, whether it's building an FAQ for certain topics on like property taxes. We get lots of questions about property taxes. What our general policies are on snow removal, whatever it is, there are lots of ideas that we can go through. And I think the next step that we will go through is prioritizing thinking about efforts and outcomes and try to put together over the next 2 years a plan of things that we can try to address, being conscious of staff's time and availability and resources available to do that. So it's balancing all of those things, and that's generally where we're trying to go with the committee. I have another topic that I'll bring up related to communications, but I'll talk about it in general discussion. There were 2 recommendations. One was we had a public comment that came out of at our December board meeting about writing a thank you letter to the folks who were involved in the Kirkwood stories for the first 50 years. So that was one recommendation. And also we had noticed in our meeting that fire wasn't having a specific customer policy. So I will open that up for any comments on those recommendations from the board, but that's where 2 things that came out of our December meeting.
What was the second item?
So one of the objectives on our general manager's objectives is to have a communication policy. And as we reviewed the previous work and communications on this before I took over as the chair, we, in our first meeting, we identified that of the list that you see on section 4, if Eric scrolls down just a little bit, there is not a plan for fire.
Oh, okay.
And so our recommendation is that there should be a plan for fire emergencies, or, not just emergencies, but fire specific communication policies.
Okay,
And so assuming that you are okay with that, we are adding that to the list.
all right,
Good.
good. Planning?
Planning committee met. We will meet again next week. We have 3 or 4, I think it's 3 members of the community who have re-upped to be on the committee. So that's good. And then I think we have a commitment from each of them to be regular and attend and engaged. And so I was pleased with the first meeting. The issue that's been carried over from the past is the approaching HOAs on the topic of propane usage. So the letter to large propane users, Eric tells me, will be going out next week. And I think you've all seen drafts of that. We'll get a draft to the board. If there are any changes to that prior, but that's underway. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Good. Personnel med, main thing we did is approve a supervisory position for combined water and wastewater. So currently Brandy individually manages 3 people and a vacancy. Presumably the vacancy is the easiest.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. And then the other thing I wanted to say is I'm going to arrange for a private session in the next board meeting, so we can do the semi-annual review for Eric. So I'll send people information on that, but we'll set aside some time to do that at the next right after the next board meeting in February. Okay, the next one is temporary advisory committee. We have one.
We have 2 special committees. We have the temporary advisory committee, right, is for fire and emergency medical services. I will again direct you to the report if Eric wants to scroll to you're on it. Okay,
I
sorry.
just skipped who the attendees were.
Well, I was
Get
just
you to the
I was going to point out that the diligency and the commitment of the committee and the members of it, and just say people put a lot of effort in and met every week, as you can see, for 4 weeks there, and then the meeting on the 28th. And obviously that was the culmination of a lot of work, and we had I thought a very successful community forum on December 28th. We had about 140, 150 people total attend, over 100 people in Red Cliffs. It was packed. We had great questions, great attendance, and I was really appreciative to the community for coming out, and certainly to the TAC for putting it on, to Vail for hosting us in the space. They were great partners through all of that. And then also for the board for approving food and beverage. I think that adds a lot to the event as well. So overall, I'm really happy with what happened there. We had a lot of questions that came into the committee via RSVPs. So I made sure that everyone got an email from me with a response that as a TAC we had worked through. So we addressed questions that came through. We got questions obviously at the event. It is a recorded event. And so what's happening now, and I will say that we did take a couple of weeks off from meeting because I think all of us were a little bit of time to regroup. And that's why you'll see at the very bottom, the next meeting is it's upcoming Wednesday. But what's going to happen now is, and I mentioned this at the meeting, but I'll say, and it's in the report as well, is we're taking the ideas and the questions and comments that came out of things that came in the RSVP that I alluded to. We got comments. We're going to collect all of that and try to build, take the speaker notes that we created for the slide deck that's included in the packet, try to put together that FAQ style, here is all of the things that we're trying to think about for people to be able to read as a kind of a pre-read to the second side of it, which would be the survey that we had discussed before. So now we have kind of, I'll say, qualitative feedback that we've received from the community. The survey will help us quantify that and obviously reach people that did not attend potentially and get their ideas. But by being able to have all the feedback and information, clarifying some questions that we got, if we misspoke in any areas, we'll make sure to correct it, whatever that is, to make sure that we have a nice survey that can quantify people's feelings, and then come back with that supplemental to help people have that in front of them when they're filling out their survey opinions. I think my big question and thought for the board here is in terms of timelines and thoughts on, obviously we want to move as fast as possible. The board wants to move on this, but I wanted to know if there were specific opinions on when we should aim to have things in front of the board at certain times.
Yeah, I have a strong opinion on that I'd like to
Okay.
offer. So two things. One is I want to emphasize the T, the temporary in the word T,
Sure.
that it is time to move toward wrapping. I think you guys have done a great job. We started this in August and there was a lot of work done, a lot of information distributed. But I feel a very strong sense of urgency for two reasons. One is the fact that we actually, our expense rate is higher than the revenue. So we're currently on borrowed time just for the current level. And the second is
The fire department. you
the
mean?
fire department,
I see.
because we've raised the compensation for the stipend we raised the expenses and we're on borrowed time for covering that. So we currently are not financially, we can make it through this year, but we're running out of time. The second is we make a grossly unfair dependency on our volunteer fire chief, on Rick, with the structure we have it now. Right now, we have plenty of volunteers. They're not all trained. And later in the year, we'll have none. We'll have less. And he is the backup for all this. I appreciate what he does, but I think it's totally unfair for this dependency. So I think we owe it to the fire department, to the community, to develop a plan and be able to start working towards it in this year. So I would like to recommend that we, at the March meeting, that we have the TAC present the findings and any specific concepts, and that at that meeting, we develop a plan of action for what we're going to do for the rest of this year. I think we should have a real plan before the end of this year. Now, maybe there'll be reasons why we can't get it done, but I think we should all work with a sense of urgency on moving forward once we have the data.
I will relay that urgency to the TAC on Wednesday. And, in terms of working backwards, that means, I think there's probably some value. I don't know that we have to have surveys and that supplemental in front of the board in February necessarily, but you all have a chance to provide awesome, great feedback. So, working from that timeline, I would say if I can try to work with our team in the next 3 weeks, then to have that supplemental and the survey drafted for the February board meeting, and then it goes out after the board meeting, and then we would have that's the timing that we would have to hit.
Yeah,
So
that's right.
Is the slideshow going to remain accessible on the website?
I will say, Rick, I think I looked the other day and I didn't see a link to the PDF anymore. I saw the video, but I might have made a mistake. So we will, but the intent is yes. But
I thought it was pretty effective.
yes, so the intent is it's on the video is on the KMPUD website right now. Thank you to Rick and team and Chris for getting that put up there. The intent is that yes, everything will be made available, everything will be very clear. That's
We had a good turnout, but it's still a fraction of the community.
100%. That's why we need to reach out more. And I think to the extent that one of the things that I did in the fall that I'm going to reach out to again is back when I was in the HOA side of things as a president, there was a president's group that I talked to, and I talked to them in the fall. And so I'm going to go reach out to them as well as just a personal thing on my side to reach out to them and say, hey, there's going to be this survey. Please announce this on your own HOA mailing list because we want to make sure that people are involved. So that's one thing I will personally be doing to help advertise this. But I encourage every board member to talk to people and people that they know in the community to encourage them to respond and participate.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Thank you very much. Okay, and the other standing committee is not the LAFCO, and no word.
I will note that the district turned in our MSP to LAFCO.
Oh, good.
I think we're the only ones though.
Yes. And I hope the data's still current by the time it's acted on.
Don't say that, Paul.
Anyway, okay, the next time is general board discussion, opportunity for board to ask questions for clarification to staff. Or to direct stuff for a subsequent agenda.
Yeah, I had
So,
one thing that
go
just
ahead.
came out of, as alluded to in the communications, is that after, one of the things I think every committee is doing is looking at their charters. And one of the things that we noticed in the communications charter is that there is used to be called the IT committee, I think, because actually in the footer of it, maybe. And there's a clear like IT component to what that is, and it's like cybersecurity, which is super critical, right? Like operationally, and from our customers' data, we would never want to have any of those things breached and have cyber attacks in any way. But I think the people that are interested in communications are thinking more about how are we making sure the KMPD effectiveness, is effectively communicating our policies, our our plans, everything that we're doing as a district. And I think those are two different things. And so what I would like to see from the perspective of like an agenda item or a conversation from the board is, and this will come out, I think, in the next time you see the communications revisions to the charter are to remove IT and cybersecurity concepts from the communications charter. And I would rather see us as a board think about another committee that is really focused on that. And I don't think that committee necessarily has to meet monthly per se to think about these things in the same way that some of our other committees do. But I do think that that would be something for us to consider as a board in the future.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like general IT should be just part of operations, and maybe the part of that you could stretch IT to be in communication would be like website content and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. I should highlight that would be two different things, is like content versus, people, you can log in, get infrastructure, and you can get your customer information in there. So how are we making sure that that's
So
operational?
let me just say, rather than discussing it now, I would appreciate a recommendation that you could put together.
Okay.
Of the changes and I think.
No, Doug and I were already gonna work on it. The communications
Yeah.
committee was fine with him and I drafting that.
Yeah, so why don't you start drafting that and then we can agendize it and make a decision.
We could do it as a twofer. We'll have all the charters under one, and then we could do that as a subsequent item right after the charters, assuming the charter's approved, then you would have the IT discussion. So
Yeah.
that would make sense for February, assuming we get everybody's charter done this month.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that suggestion. I think it's great. Are there any other more discussion? Okay, then declare this meeting adjourned. We didn't meet either predictions, but
I forgot, in my defense, I forgot Doug had 3 things to talk about.
yes, and you're excused.
I
This
was
calculus.
just way off.
And Jeff, thank you very much for coming all this way, and we hope you get down the mountain before
Yeah.
it's the roads are still pretty good.
Not a problem.
Jeff, where was the guardrail that you talked about in the Caltrans meeting today? Eric would probably know about.
You know,
that.
where you're driving down from the Arco storage down to the Union 76?
Yeah.
They nailed that guardrail again.
Okay.
Do you know, so we can stop the meeting, of course. I counted,
900.
Tommy and I were
We have
driving
a
up
couple
one
of things
day.
to sign.
I
I don't know if
counted.
Brittany's here.